everyone, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns, and welcome back to History of One Piece, where I chronicle, review, debate, and analyze the various different arcs of One Piece. Today we're once again taking a dive into the second story arc of One Piece to learn about the infamous Captain Morgan and his nefarious spiced rum. Now, I'm sure to most One Piece fans, the Captain Morgan arc is rather insignificant in the grand scheme of things, compared to the Romance Dawn, Baratie, and Arlong arcs, which all delve into important character backstories and greatly expand upon the world of One Piece. Captain Morgan's importance is rather minute. Despite this fact, I always found this particular arc interesting. While the Alvida arc is mostly centered around introducing us to the main character, Monkey D. Luffy, the Captain Morgan arc is primarily focused on Luffy gaining the first member of his pirate crew. At the moment, Luffy is simply drifting from island to island in his small ship with nobody to help him become the Pirate King. Without a proper crew, Luffy isn't going to get very far, so this arc is about him finding somebody to help him on this journey. While later arcs will also focus on this particular idea, this arc is a bit different since it doesn't focus on the backstory of his new crew member. When creating this story arc, Oda hadn't fully developed his writing style, and it certainly shows in the first few arcs of the anime. These days, when Oda introduces a potential crew member, he ties a villain to this crew member and revolves an entire arc around them and their backstory in order for you to grow attached to them before they join the crew. In this way, they feel like a part of the crew before they join, and the crew dynamic doesn't feel like it's changed all that much. Over time, the character can grow and change the crew from within, but the focus these days is the setup with an emotional gut punch of an arc. That isn't the case with the Captain Morgan arc, however. Captain Morgan instead places our main characters in a completely unrelated town that will only be mentioned again briefly in the manga, and, as far as I know, never again in the anime. In my opinion, this is the first major weakness of the early One Piece story arcs. The locations have no real connection to the important characters, and the minor characters never really show up again for the most part. This is particularly noticeable during the Captain Morgan and Buggy arcs, where we have interesting stories centered around the towns Luffy visits, but the importance of the town itself never really extends beyond the minor conflict introduced in these arcs. Once the conflict is resolved, the main characters move forward, and we don't hear much about the town again. Shell's Town, the specific venue of the Captain Morgan arc, really doesn't have any bearing on the rest of One Piece, and to that extent, most people don't look back on this arc as anything really special. There are certainly major moments and interactions in this arc, but that happens throughout the entirety of One Piece, and is not really specific to this individual arc. With that being said, however, when I first covered the Captain Morgan arc on History of One Piece, I don't think I properly conveyed why I personally like this arc, despite its lack of importance. In fact, in some cases, I overplayed the importance of certain interactions and scenes to an extent. To be perfectly honest, this is the one portion of History of One Piece that I'm personally not proud of. While I always planned to remake the Alvida arc due to the audio being bad in that first episode, the Captain Morgan arc is one I've wanted to remake for ages because I believe I just did a bad job on it. Much like Oda, I was still discovering my creative voice and a format that worked for my show. It wasn't until Romance Dawn that I really hit my stride, and in that vein, I've been itching to go back and redo these two arcs long before Toei started messing with the show. At the same time, this is part of why I like the Captain Morgan arc. I can certainly see the problems presented here, which I will address in a bit, but at the same time, I can see the potential and the passion that Oda puts in. It really is infectious for a creative individual like myself because I can see how far One Piece has come from this point. In any case, let's dive back into the Captain Morgan arc and watch as Luffy searches for the first member of his pirate crew.
So come on board and bring along all your hopes and dreams. Together we will find everything that we're looking for. There's always room for you.
The Captain Morgan arc begins exactly where we left off, with Luffy and Kobe sailing across the seas in a tiny boat. We can see that Kobe is steering the ship because Luffy has no navigation skill whatsoever. As Luffy continues to lounge about the ship, Kobe reminds Luffy that Zorro is also at the Marine base. After that brief bit of foreshadowing, Luffy and Kobe arrive at the marine town. As they walk through the crowded streets, Kobe tries to warn Luffy not to ask Zorro to join his crew. After all, he is a pirate hunter. It's kind of his job to hunt down pirates. He's not just gonna up and join a pirate crew at the drop of a hat. At the mention of Zorro's name, all of the townspeople run for cover. As they continue to walk down the street, Kobe notes that a Captain Morgan is in charge of this marine base. So that's why the rum is always gone. For some reason, the townspeople also duck and cover when they hear Morgan's name. At the marine base, Kobe gets ready to part ways with Luffy, but he's interrupted when Luffy climbs the walls surrounding the base and spots Zorro in the distance. Zorro is so badass that his very presence causes the wind to stir and the music to go into overdrive. That's just the mark of Zorro. Hot damn, I love Zorro. Luffy wants to untie Zorro and help him escape, but Kobe is completely against it. Kobe and Luffy continue to argue until they're interrupted by a small girl who appears beside them. As they look on in stunned silence, the girl climbs over the wall, walks over to Zorro, and offers him some onigiri. For those who don't know, an onigiri is a ball of rice wrapped in seaweed that usually contains some type of meat in the center. This is a staple meal in Japanese cuisine, although most of the 4Kids dub changed it to a jelly donut, because these are totally jelly donuts. Yeah, right. Zorro tells the girl to get lost, but before she can take the hint, the Marines arrive to break up the party. Kobe is relieved that the Marines are here, but we soon see that not all Marines are just. Not only does Helmeppo steal the onigiri from the girl, but he tramples both of them into the ground and makes her cry simply because she made the onigiri with sugar instead of salt. I mean, children do have different taste buds than adults. To a child, sweet food tastes better. Either way, this was her first time making them, and she made them with all of her heart. This guy seriously needs a smack in the face for being such a colossal dick. In addition to this act of cruelty, Helmeppo reveals that he's the son of Captain Morgan, and by Morgan's decree, anyone caught helping Zorro will be executed. Well, it seems that Helmeppo has at least a shred of decency, because instead of killing the girl, he orders the Marines to toss her over the wall instead. Yeah, it's not much better, but at least he's not outright killing a little girl. After some hesitation, a Marine soldier tosses the girl over the wall, apologizing as he does so. Without a second thought, Luffy reaches out and catches the girl in midair. Meanwhile, back in the base, Zorro tells Helmeppo that he intends to survive the entire month. After Helmeppo leaves, Luffy climbs over the wall and strikes up a conversation with Zorro. Luffy comments that he would have starved to death within 3 days, but Zorro just smiles. He says that he will survive to show them who's boss. My god. The badass levels, they're over 8,000! Zorro, you're too much. Before he can leave though, Zorro asks Luffy to feed him the trampled onigiri. Back in town, Luffy tells the girl that Zorro ate every last bite. When Kobe asks the girl if Zorro is really as evil as they say, the girl says, "Nope." The girl explains how Helmeppo's pet wolf attacked her in her mother's bar, but Zorro saved her at the last second. Staring death in the face, Helmeppo makes a last-ditch effort to save his worthless life. He says that if Captain Morgan finds out, the girl and her mom will be executed. However, if Zorro can survive 1 month in prison, Helmeppo will let Zorro and the civilians go free. For the past 3 weeks, Zorro has endured through sheer willpower alone. Every day, Helmeppo punches and kicks him, but still Zorro refuses to give up. Hot damn, give this guy a medal. He's superhuman. I couldn't last 1 day without eating. Meanwhile, Helmeppo returns to the bar his wolf trashed in the flashback and demands free food for him and all of his men. While Helmeppo continues to be completely obnoxious, the camera pans over to Orange Hair, who is sitting nearby. As Luffy walks into the bar, he overhears Helmeppo say that he's decided to execute Zorro tomorrow because he's tired of waiting. Luffy gets so pissed at this statement that he rushes right up to Helmeppo and punches him into the wall. Man, that feels cathartic. Back at the Marine base, we're finally introduced to Captain Axehand Morgan. Morgan complains that the townspeople haven't been giving him much tribute as of late. The Marine explains that the income of the town has decreased, so the people don't really have that much to give him in the first place, but Morgan thinks that the problem is that the people do not have enough admiration for him. Yeah, because that's how the economy works. Sure thing, Morgan. As Morgan continues to spout utter nonsense, Helmeppo bursts into his office and states that there is a person he wants his father to kill. Back in the execution field, Zorro is assaulted by a flashback of a young woman. As Zorro wakes up from his daydream, he sees that Luffy has returned. Luffy tells Zorro that he's going to untie his ropes and make Zorro a member of his pirate crew. Luffy runs off to the Marine base to get the swords, but Zorro points out that Luffy is going the wrong way. Luffy stops and uses his Gumgum rocket to launch himself to the other side of the execution field. At the same time, on the roof of the Marine base, Captain Morgan watches as the rest of the Marines raise a statue in his honor, no doubt made from the tribute he demanded from the townspeople. Before Morgan can order them to lift the statue fully, Helmeppo interrupts him and asks why he isn't helping Helmeppo get his revenge. Captain Morgan throws Helmeppo to the ground and states that there was an intruder in the execution field earlier that day, and Helmeppo says that he took care of it. Morgan orders one of the Marines to kill the girl, but the Marine refuses. Morgan knocks out the Marine with his axe hand, stating that anyone who opposes him is a traitor. Helmeppo is shocked at this, saying that Morgan didn't have to go this far. With the loyalty of the Marines in check, Morgan says he'll take care of the kid later. For now, he orders the Marines to raise the statue that took many months of taxpayer dollars and symbolizes Morgan's power. While this is happening, Luffy arrives at the Marine base to find it deserted. The Marines continue to raise the statue, but one of them accidentally bumps the statue against one of the base's towers. Luffy hears the statue bumping the tower up above and uses his Gumgum rocket to launch himself up to the roof. The destruction of the statue angers Captain Morgan, and he orders the immediate capture of Luffy. Luffy finds Helmeppo amidst the chaos and kidnaps him in order to find Zorro's swords. Morgan orders the Marines to go after them, but he soon discovers that there is yet another intruder. Kobe has entered the execution yard. As he says this, Orange Hair also sneaks into the Marine base, materializing from thin air. The Orange Ninja strikes again. Wait a second, Orange Hair is Naruto. Believe it. Back on Luffy's side of the base, Helmeppo tells him that the swords are in his room, which they just passed. Back in the execution yard, Kobe tries to free Zorro from his bonds. Zorro shouts at Kobe that he can't run because he has only 10 days left, but Kobe reveals that Helmeppo never intended to keep his promise. As soon as Kobe finishes his speech, Morgan arrives to crash the party and orders both of them to be executed. Geez, this guy is trigger happy. Back inside the base, Luffy enters Helmeppo's room and finds 3 swords there. Since Helmeppo has passed out, Luffy grabs all 3 swords and spots Kobe in the execution yard. As they are about to be executed, Zorro says he can't die in a place like this and is assaulted by another mini flashback. When all hope seems lost, Luffy launches himself out the window and lands in between Zorro and the Marines. The Marines shoot Luffy, but we see that bullets have no effect on the man made of rubber. And with that statement, episode 2 and the first half of the Captain Morgan arc comes to a close. Episode 3 begins with a brief recap of the ending of Episode 2. Luffy launches himself out of the window, and we're shown once again that Luffy is effectively bulletproof. Koby says that he was surprised at first, but now he believes that Luffy will indeed become the Pirate King, and find the ultimate treasure, One Piece. While this is happening, the Marines are still stunned by the fact that Luffy just survived a barrage of bullets. Morgan says that it seems Luffy ate one of the devil fruit and gives us a little more information on the concept of devil fruit. As Luffy struggles to untie Zorro, Morgan regains his composure. The Marines charge toward the pirates, but they're stopped at the last second by Zorro. Now, I counted, and there are at least 8 Marines here being stopped by one man. This is the very definition of awesome. Kenpachi Zaraki is tame compared to this guy. Zorro tells Luffy that he promised to be a pirate, but he will always follow his own ambitions to become the world's greatest swordsman. Luffy tells Zorro to duck and takes out all the Marines with a well-aimed Gumgum whip. He tells Zorro that he ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi, and the Marines cower in fear. Morgan orders the Marines who are complaining to shoot themselves in the head, saying that he doesn't need weaklings like them. Talk about a terrible boss. Like, is there a good retirement package? Why would you work for this guy? And with that, Luffy and Morgan begin their fight. This battle is much more fast-paced than the Alvida fight scene and really showcases how powerful Morgan is. In the end though, Morgan is no match for Luffy. As Luffy continues to punch Morgan in the face, Helmeppo points a spring-loaded hammer at Koby's head and holds him hostage. Oh, wait a second, I'm thinking of the 4Kids dub. God, that still makes no goddamn sense. Whoever made that edit deserves to be punched. Anyway, Helmeppo points a pistol at Koby's head. Luffy readies his fist and slowly walks towards Helmeppo. As he does so, Morgan gets back up and tries to attack him from behind. And with Captain Morgan finally defeated, the Marines rejoice. They had been living in constant fear of Morgan, and now they can finally serve the townspeople as honest Marines. Back in the Marine base, Orange Hair ties up 2 of the Marines and searches Morgan's office for something of importance. Back at the bar, Luffy and Zorro have a victory meal. Koby explains that there are 2 oceans in the world of One Piece, and they're separated by a stretch of land known as the Red Line. Perpendicular to the Red Line is a road known to pirates as the Grand Line. A long time ago, 22 years to be exact, the pirate Gold Roger obtained everything in the world. It is said that he left his great treasure, One Piece, in the Grand Line.
Hey, so hi, I'm Mr. Editor. Hi, my name is Philip. Usually I would not interrupt like this and would just put up text if there are any missing lines that need to be there, but what we weren't accounting for with Morgan is that the last chunk of the recap section of this audio is super reliant on footage from the actual episode. We've been pondering what to do, and unfortunately there's no real easy workaround here. A lot of crucial lines are missing from this chunk of the recap because they were said with, the footage in mind, and that the footage would explain what those lines mean. But unfortunately we can't use the footage, and it wouldn't make sense to leave the audio as is. So I'm just gonna quickly give a rundown of what is being cut. We really didn't want to have to do this, but there's very little workarounds here. So, Koby worries about Luffy and Zorro heading out to the Grand Line. He's touched that Luffy says that they are friends, and he says that Zorro and Luffy motivated him to pursue his childhood dream of being a Marine. Just then, the Marines come and tell Luffy and Zorro that while they are grateful to the both of them for defeating Morgan, they will need to leave since they are pirates. In return, the Marines won't report them. Koby is then asked whether or not he is also a pirate, to which Luffy begins to spout off his history, to which Koby does not want the Marines knowing. This leads to the famous scene of the arc where Koby punches Luffy and Luffy punches back, convincing the Marines that he is not associated with Koby. And that basically brings us up to speed. Once again, I'm so sorry for having to chime in on Zen's video. You're not here for some dumb Australian. You're here for, Zen and all her cuteness and all her buns. But this is honestly unavoidable. I was trying to think for a long time, and by a long time I mean a few hours, like what we should do for this section, and unfortunately, we have no real other workaround, which is why I had to chime in here. We'll be looking over the other old History of One Piece episodes to make sure the scripts are now accustomed to a clipless analysis, and luckily, once we reach the Syrup Village arc, this isn't an issue we'll be having anymore, since by then we'll have caught up to where Zen was with History of One Piece before Toei started to, fuck shit up. And yes, I pronounce it as Toei. I'm sorry, I'm weird. I'm a weird, dumb Australian. Thank you for understanding, and now I will leave you back with Zen.
With Luffy proving that he's not associated with Koby, Koby immediately turns around and asks to join the Marines. One of the Marines is against it, but Koby shows his determination by asking one more time. Meanwhile, down at the docks, Orange Hair gets into her own ship and sets sail after Buggy. Before they can set sail, Koby rushes down to the docks and thanks Luffy for everything he's done. He salutes the pirates, showing them respect for the good deeds that they have done. As Luffy and Zorro set sail, Rika and her mother, Koby, and the rest of the Marines appear to see them off. Out on the open sea, Luffy once again says that he will become the Pirate King, and with that, the Alvida arc and episode 3 comes to a close. The Captain Morgan arc is actually rather simple when you look at it. I mean, this is a basic transition arc in an anime. We have the introduction of a new character, the departure of a character from the last arc, and a villain to tie these 2 points together. In terms of plot, there's not a lot that happens in this arc, but Oda makes up for it by giving us an incredible amount of character moments. There are so many memorable scenes and pieces of dialogue that you forget how basic the plot structure is at times. The character moments may look cool, but they aren't there just for show. There are things established here that will have great importance later down the line. Koby's dream to become a Marine will return in a few hundred episodes for a big payoff. Zorro's ambition to become the world's greatest swordsman is a central part of his character that will come into play during future story arcs. Luffy's desire to help other people and his urge to head into the Grand Line may not have been established in this arc, but they're built upon here, and we learn crucial details about his character through his actions in this arc. The Captain Morgan arc does a great job of building up these characters so that they can have greater impact on later arcs. In addition to establishing characters for later, the Captain Morgan arc gives us some additional information about the world of One Piece. First of all, we learn a little bit more about the Devil Fruit. They're considered extremely rare and thought of as a legend in the East Blue, the ocean that Luffy is currently sailing through. Morgan is a Marine captain, and even he doesn't know too much about the fruit. The Devil Fruit are said to grant strange powers to the user, such as the ability to breathe fire or the power to create tsunamis at will. It should be noted that these are not proven abilities of the fruit at this point. These are only rumors that Morgan has heard and could be false for all we know. In this way, the world of One Piece is established naturally, with us learning facts about the world at the same time as the characters. We also learn the location of the Grand Line and its significance in the One Piece landscape. The Grand Line is where Gold Roger left his legendary treasure and where pirates must go to prove themselves. The Grand Line is also extremely dangerous and referred to as the Graveyard of Pirates. Again, we only know what Koby has heard from gossip and rumor, so the only concrete thing we know is the location and history behind it. Gold Roger is also mentioned here for the first time. We aren't told too much about him, besides the fact that he was once the most famous pirate in the world, and that he left his treasure somewhere in the Grand Line. Now, this was first established in the opening theme of the anime, but this is the first time that anyone has mentioned Roger in the story itself. All of these plot points are brought up in this arc, but they won't really come into play until later down the line. This is one of the reasons why some people find the pacing of One Piece to be a bit too slow at times. It takes its time building up the world and the characters, and that might turn some people off at first. Personally, I do find it very engaging because I can get attached to the characters early on and I'm able to root for them when their backs are pushed against a wall. I would much rather learn about the characters early on instead of too late into the anime to even care about them. I'm talking about you, Bleach. You suck at character development. Speaking of characters, the Captain Morgan arc focuses on quite a few more characters than the Alvida arc. Where the Alvida arc served as an introduction to Luffy and Kobe, the Morgan arc serves to flesh out these characters and introduce us to a few more. In addition to our two leads, the arc focuses on Captain Morgan, Helmeppo, Roronoa Zorro, and Rika, the girl who made the onigiri. While not all of them get a character arc, each character has a specific role to play, and all of them become important later down the line. Well, maybe not Rika, but she does show up again in the manga, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Once again, Luffy remains static throughout the arc because he doesn't really need to change just yet. However, we do learn a bit more about him from his actions and his interaction with the rest of the characters. The first major thing we learn here is that Luffy knows absolutely nothing about navigation. Before Luffy got caught up in the whirlpool in the last arc, he was drifting around the ocean in a small boat, simply hoping he'd reach land soon. In episode 2, he lets Kobe steer the boat and is amazed that Kobe can get them to the marine island. This may seem trivial until you consider the fact that Luffy wants to be a pirate captain. If he's going to sail to the Grand Line, he absolutely needs to find a navigator. He's never going to make it to the Grand Line if he keeps drifting around from place to place. While this problem isn't addressed in this arc, it is foreshadowed here very briefly and should be remembered for later. When Luffy arrives at the town, he announces his arrival and his intention to visit the marine base. This further showcases how completely confident Luffy is in his abilities. He's not subtle, and he doesn't hide the fact that he's a pirate because he doesn't feel he has to. He's not afraid of the Marines, and he has faith in his skills, so what's the point of hiding who he is? To him, it makes more sense to announce his presence, especially because he intends to be the Pirate King someday. One thing to note here is that Luffy once again refuses to listen to Kobe's warning about Zorro. At the end of episode 1, Luffy stated that he wanted to see Zorro for himself before he could decide if Zorro was bad or not. In episode 2, Luffy repeats the statement almost word for word. This tells us two things about Luffy. First of all, once Luffy's mind is made up, it is impossible to change it. Seriously, this guy does not change his mind. If he wants to go to talk to Zorro, he's going to talk to Zorro, and Kobe is not going to stop him. Second, Luffy doesn't judge people based on their reputation. He uses his own judgment, and only when he has seen the person for himself. These are two qualities that every pirate captain needs, especially pirates who are setting sail for the Grand Line. If Luffy was wishy-washy or easily swayed by other people, he wouldn't have the determination needed to become the Pirate King, and some pirates are just all talk. He needs quality people on his crew. Another important thing to note is that when Helmeppo first appears, Kobe is thankful that the Marines have arrived, and he turns to Luffy to confirm this idea, but Luffy doesn't answer him. From the look on Luffy's face, he can tell that Helmeppo is bad news. The thing is, Luffy has a knack for reading people. With just a look, he can easily form an opinion of a person, and his opinion is accurate 95% of the time. Now, you're probably wondering how Luffy is able to do this. Well, this ties back to his interaction with Kobe in episode 1, and into something we won't learn until much later down the line. We'll get back to this later, but for now, just remember that Luffy is great at sensing people's emotions and intentions. After Helmeppo leaves, Luffy climbs over the wall and talks with Zorro for the first time. Now, I'm going to talk more about this scene later, but this is some serious character development for Luffy. Throughout the entire scene, Luffy is testing Zorro. He wants to see if Zorro is worthy of being on his crew, and every sentence, every single line of dialogue is important. The very first thing Luffy does is try to confirm whether or not the rumors about Zorro are true. However, Zorro doesn't answer Luffy's question. Because Zorro dodges Luffy's first question, he switches tactics and asks if Zorro is really as strong as they say. This question does a few things. First of all, this is a direct insult to Zorro. Luffy is trying to make Zorro mad to see how he reacts. Luffy needs a first mate who is cool-headed and able to deal with Luffy's zaniness. And Luffy has a lot of zaniness, let me tell you that much. If Zorro reacted like the pirates on Alvida's ship, Luffy would probably have given up on Zorro that very second. Secondly, Luffy is prying Zorro for information. How was he captured? Why was he captured? Luffy wants to know if Zorro is strong enough to be on his crew. If Zorro was just easily captured by the Marines, there's no way that he could weather the dangers of the Grand Line. Once again, Luffy is directly challenging Zorro here. He wants to know why Zorro hasn't escaped yet, if he's so strong. I mean, how can Zorro have such a reputation if he allows himself to remain captured? Luffy wants to know if Zorro is worthy of being rescued. He turns to leave, but Zorro stops him and asks for the onigiri on the ground. From Luffy's smile, you can see that this act of selflessness has made a great impression on Luffy. He may not know why, but Zorro has done something incredibly kind for Rika, and that means a lot in Luffy's book. Directly afterward, Luffy tells Rika that Zorro ate both of the trampled onigiri. This is a small point, but it really shows how nice Luffy can be. I mean, Luffy isn't doing this for his own benefit. He's doing it solely for Zorro and Rika, and that means he's a good person. When Luffy confronts Zorro again, his mind is made up. It's important to note that he doesn't just ask Zorro to join him. Luffy knows by this point that Zorro is the perfect man to be his first mate, and he won't take no for an answer. Pay specific attention to the way this conversation is worded. Zorro refuses to join Luffy because he doesn't want to become a pirate. "You want me to be a bad guy?" Zorro says. Consider the fact that Zorro is a renowned pirate hunter. He's probably killed hundreds of pirates in his line of work and seen firsthand just how evil they can be. Luffy doesn't see it that way though. "What's wrong with being a pirate?" he says. To Luffy, just being a pirate doesn't make you a bad person. The title really doesn't matter. It's what you do as a pirate that makes you good or evil. Luffy is always doing good deeds for people he doesn't even know, so he considers himself good regardless of what he is. When Zorro calls pirates scum, Luffy points out the fact that Zorro is known as an evil pirate hunter. Again, Luffy values a person's actions over their reputation. Sure, Zorro has the title of pirate hunter, but he's shown through his actions that he's a noble person worthy of being on Luffy's crew, and that's all that matters to Luffy. Now, what happens next might make Luffy look like an idiot, but there is a reason for it. If you think back to the beginning of the episode, you can clearly see that the marine base is visible from the port of the town and from the front gate of the base. The base is a central part of the town. Luffy may do dumb things from time to time, but he's not stupid enough to miss the giant building at the top of the island with marine base written on it. The question remains then, why did Luffy run the wrong way? Well, the answer is quite simple. Luffy ran the wrong way on purpose. No, think about it. The very next thing Luffy does is use his Gumgum rocket to launch himself to the other side of the yard. Luffy could have simply walked or ran to the other end of the yard, but he didn't. He ran the wrong way to get Zorro's attention and then used his rocket to show Zorro that he isn't an ordinary person. Luffy wanted to get Zorro interested in being a member of his pirate crew, and showing off his devil fruit ability certainly did the trick. When Luffy attacks the marine base, you begin to see that Luffy is far from perfect. He destroys the statue of Captain Morgan, and while he does apologize briefly, he doesn't even think about paying for the damages. He straight up kidnaps Helmeppo to find Zorro's swords, and he uses Helmeppo as a human shield when the Marines threaten to shoot, in one of the funnier scenes of the anime. Luffy may be a good person at heart, but he's not a saint. He'll stand up for what he believes to be right, but he's not above using dirty tactics to get the job done. We didn't really see this side of Luffy in the last episode, and it's a great development for his character. I mean, I would rather have a protagonist with flaws rather than someone who is just plain perfect. When Luffy sees that Kobe and Zorro are in trouble, he immediately launches himself out of the window and rushes to their rescue. This scene is very reminiscent of when Luffy saved Rika. He rushes to save those in need without a second thought. He arrives just in time to save the day, and he looks badass while doing it. After Luffy bounces back the bullets, Zorro asks him just what the hell he is. Luffy just smiles and says that he's the man who will become the Pirate King. Rather than answer Zorro's question, he says the one thing that will get Zorro's attention most of all. Saying that you're going to be the Pirate King is a big deal in the world of One Piece, but to Luffy it's a casual statement. He doesn't care about the odds or the impossibility of his dream. He's going to be the Pirate King, and that's that. During the battle against the Marines, Luffy takes all of them out with a single attack, further showcasing just how strong Luffy is. Ordinary Marines are no match for him, and he still isn't even trying. One thing I didn't really mention last arc was Luffy's attacks. Whenever Luffy uses his Devil Fruit for an attack, he shouts the attack name, much like a Super Sentai or Super Robot show. This gives the attack some more weight and makes each one feel a bit more epic. Thus far, Luffy has used 3 different Gumgum attacks. There's Gumgum Rocket, where he launches his body at his enemies like a rocket, Gumgum Whip, where he stretches his leg and uses it as a whip, and Gumgum Pistol, where he stretches back his arm and uses the tension to increase the force of his normal punch. All of Luffy's attacks are named after real weapons or objects that Luffy has seen during his travels, giving his attacks a little bit more identity behind them. He uses real-world logic behind every single attack. One of the reasons I like Luffy so much is the fact that he doesn't just rely on punching people. He's always coming up with new and unique attacks to fight his enemies. I'll point out each new attack as this retrospective continues. For the beginning of the fight, Luffy doesn't put too much effort behind his attacks. He does enough to knock down the Marines, but that's about it. However, when Morgan orders his men to shoot themselves in the head, Luffy rushes into battle and punches Morgan as hard as he can. One of the most important things to Luffy is his friends. He values his friends and his crewmates above all else, and he will defend them with his life. With that said, when he sees other people treating their comrades like trash, Luffy gets pissed. This idea will come up again later on, but it is used to great effect here. During his fight with Captain Morgan, Luffy proves once again how strong he is. Luffy goes through the entire battle with relative ease and still doesn't break a sweat. Morgan may be strong, but Luffy is clearly leagues above him at this point. Also, this is the first time we see how fast and maneuverable Luffy can be in battle. He's able to keep up with Morgan throughout the entire fight and dodges all of Morgan's attacks. There's even one attack that Luffy dodges in midair and turns into a counterattack without having the chance to think. While the battle is pretty short, it is enjoyable, and Luffy certainly impresses with his fighting prowess. I mean, he didn't even have to use a Devil Fruit attack to take down Morgan. At the end of the fight, Luffy continues to punch Morgan in the face, berating Morgan for destroying Kobe's dreams. This is interesting to me because he doesn't condemn Morgan for trying to kill his friends. Instead, he's angrier over the fact that Morgan is a corrupt Marine and has trampled over the just profession that Kobe idolized. Luffy knows firsthand how important a dream can be to someone, and so he gets even more pissed when somebody shatters the dream of his comrades. When Helmeppo tries to use Kobe as a hostage, Luffy just smiles at him. He knows that Helmeppo is bluffing, and he fully believes in Kobe. Kobe is serious about protecting both his and Luffy's dreams. Helmeppo doesn't have the conviction to pull that trigger, and Luffy knows it. Well, unless it's the 4Kids version, then he doesn't have the conviction to pull a spring-loaded hammer. God, that doesn't even make sense. As Luffy punches Helmeppo, Morgan gets up again and tries to attack him from behind. Luffy is aware of this, and yet he doesn't stop his attack. This is another test for Zorro. Will you protect my life even if I don't ask you to? Zorro passes the test with flying colors, taking down Morgan with a single attack. I'll talk more about this when I get to Zorro, but it is interesting that Luffy and Zorro were able to develop such a close bond so quickly. After the battle, we get to see another first for One Piece, the post-battle party. During the series, every time Luffy defeats the main villain of an arc, there's always a celebration and a feast, and Luffy is in the middle, completely stuffing his face. I just love the fact that he's able to eat more than Zorro, who hasn't eaten in 3 weeks. When Zorro asks how many crewmates Luffy has, we begin to see how unrealistic Luffy is. Luffy has 1 crew member in a dinky little boat, and he thinks he's ready to set sail for the Grand Line already. A while later, when the Marines ask Luffy and Zorro to leave the town, Luffy smiles once again. Luffy doesn't mind leaving. He knows that he can't stay there forever, and being forced to leave town is all part of being a pirate. This will certainly not be the last time Luffy is forced to leave a town. As I said before, Luffy is quite static in this arc, but we learn so much about him in just these 2 episodes. It may seem like a lot to take in, but it is paced incredibly well, and a lot of it is very subtle. Luffy is the main character of the story, and so he gets the most development, but the secondary characters also get some focus as well. First of all, we have Kobe. In the last arc, Kobe learned to stand up for himself and his dreams, but he still wasn't fully able to change. The Captain Morgan arc serves as a continuation of this idea. In the beginning, while Kobe is supportive of Luffy, he continues to warn Luffy not to talk to Zorro. At this point, Kobe is looking at the world in very simple terms. In his eyes, all Marines are just, all pirates are evil, and a man with a reputation as a demon pirate hunter is not to be trusted. Luffy is the one exception, but as I stated before, Luffy doesn't act like a normal pirate and Kobe doesn't view him as such. I mean, Luffy did save his life after all, and pirates generally don't do that. This idea continues throughout episode 2, as Kobe is relieved when the Marines arrive and constantly wonder why the townspeople are afraid of Morgan. It isn't until Kobe witnesses Helmeppo's cruelty firsthand and learns of Zorro's sacrifice for Rika that Kobe's mindset begins to change. The next time we see Kobe is in episode 3, where he breaks into the Marine base, tries to free Zorro by himself, and tells Luffy to crush these Marines. It is clear at this point that Kobe is beginning to see the world in a different light. He is using his own eyes and his own judgment now, and that is a major development. At the end of the arc, while Kobe warns Luffy not to go to the Grand Line, he has grown a lot as a character and shows great courage when he asks to become a Marine. While the Captain Morgan arc serves as a conclusion to Kobe's individual character arc, this is only a temporary conclusion. We will visit Kobe again in the future and see just how much he has grown as a character. Now, while Kobe's development in this arc isn't exactly new to the world of anime, I think it was very well executed. Oda took a character who was whiny and annoying and made us care about him by the end of this story arc. Kobe is a perfect foil for Luffy, having completely opposite goals and ideals, and yet he becomes Luffy's first major friend in the story of One Piece. I will touch further upon this relationship in later arcs. Yeah, Kobe is still around in One Piece as recent as the latest story arc in the manga, and I can't wait to talk about his development there, because he is a badass! He's literally Jesus, he can walk on water! I'm serious! The first major character introduced in the Captain Morgan arc is Roronoa Zorro. While he only plays a secondary role in this arc, Zorro is one of the most important characters in One Piece and arguably the most badass. Unfortunately, Zorro doesn't exactly have a lot to do in this arc. He spends most of his time tied to a post in the Marine prison yard, and most of what we learn about him is told via flashback. With that said, Zorro does go through a character arc during the first 3 episodes. In episode 1 and the beginning of episode 2, we are led to believe that Zorro is an unstoppable demon who kills people indiscriminately. While this information is false, it does color our perception of Zorro as a person, and it is a distinct part of his character arc. When we first see Zorro, this negative perception of him is further solidified by the ominous presence surrounding him and his warning to get lost. It's not until later that we realize that Zorro is trying to protect the people of the town by telling them to stay away. Our perception of Zorro is completely shattered when we see him eat the trampled onigiri. This action is the very defining moment of Zorro's character. Everything you thought you knew about Zorro is put into question here, and I simply love it. Zorro, the man who eats a ball of dirt just to make a child feel better. Simply badass. This generosity is only further showcased as we learn why Zorro is tied up in the first place. The only other major development in episode 2 is the flashback that Zorro has of the young woman. This gives us a brief hint of Zorro's past, but it also explains why Zorro saved Rika from Helmeppo's pet wolf. Now, Zorro is a nice guy, but I get the impression that he saved Rika because she reminded him of the girl from the flashback. I'll talk more about this when we actually get to see Zorro's full backstory. In episode 3, we get a few more hints about Zorro's past. He has his own dream to become the world's greatest swordsman, and it has something to do with the girl in the flashback. One of the most powerful things about his ambition is that he follows it with all of his heart. He is indebted to Luffy because Luffy saved his life, and yet Zorro says he'll kill Luffy if he ever interferes with his ambitions. He also says that he doesn't care if he is known as a devil or a saint. Either way, he intends to have the world know his name. Whatever happened in his past was powerful enough to make him pursue his goals at the cost of everything else. I'll touch more upon this past when it is brought up again in the anime. The final development for Zorro in this arc comes when Luffy is attacked by Captain Morgan. Luffy doesn't have to ask Zorro to come to his aid. The very moment that Morgan starts to attack, Zorro rushes in and protects his new captain. There is a very real bond between the two of them even now. While this does have a lot to do with Luffy saving Zorro's life, I also think this is because there are quite a few parallels between Luffy and Zorro. For both of these characters, we learn about them through their actions, and we don't learn about their pasts until later down the line. Both Luffy and Zorro use reverse psychology in this arc in order to protect the people they care about, and both of them have dreams that seem impossible to everyone else. They are perfectly compatible with one another, and that really shows in this scene. Zorro may not have physically done much in this arc, but he leaves a great first impression. progression. He goes from being a demon swordsman to a loyal crewmate in less than 3 episodes, and quickly becomes one of the most compelling characters in the series. He'll only continue to grow more awesome as the series progresses. The one major problem I see with Zorro's development though, is that it doesn't really matter to the arc as a whole. His introduction and his interaction with Rika do show off his character, but they are only tangentially related to Morgan. It's not bad per se, but it does end up feeling like Morgan is only one part of the arc and Zorro is another. It could have used a bit more connection in my opinion, but overall, Zorro is still given some great material to work with. One of the few characters who I really don't care for in One Piece is Helmeppo. He's a spineless coward who enjoys tormenting people, but calls for his father when anyone dares to oppose him. Yes, we're not supposed to like him, but he simply does not work as a villain. Much like Alvida, Helmeppo looks completely ridiculous, and I can't take him seriously at all. I mean, his head looks like a freaking onion for God's sake. You could argue that we really aren't supposed to take Helmeppo seriously, especially because even his father considers him worthless, but that's not entirely true. When Helmeppo first appears, we're supposed to view him as a threat to Rika. We don't know that he's a coward at this point, so we're supposed to take his threats seriously, but that's just impossible because he looks so goddamn weird. Helmeppo would work so much better if he just looked like a normal goddamn person. Helmeppo doesn't really have a character arc per se. He spends the majority of the arc being a complete dick to everyone in town just because his father is captain of the Marine base, and he never really changes, at least in this story arc. There is a point near the end of the arc where Oda tries to redeem Helmeppo a bit, but it doesn't work the way he intended. He shows that Helmeppo does not want to kill Rika because she's only a little girl, and he protests when Morgan begins to attack his own men. Now, this may seem like character growth, but it really isn't. He's still the same person that he always was. He never once opposes his father or apologizes for his past actions. He even holds Kobe hostage later on in the arc at gunpoint. I mean, spring-loaded hammer point. I mean gunpoint. Helmeppo hasn't turned over a new leaf here. He's just a coward. Plain and simple, and he's only interested in doing what is best for himself. He's not quite as bad as his father, but that's not really saying much. He does have some moral principles, albeit very few, and they look good when compared to his father, but that doesn't excuse what he's done in the past. And yes, I know that he will change later down the line, but in terms of this arc, he is just a horrible person, and he doesn't change. Overall, Helmeppo just rubs me the wrong way. He is a despicable person through and through, but he never comes across as a good villain. Luffy takes him down in one punch with no effort, and he looks even less threatening than Alvida, and that's saying something. He never really grows or changes in the arc, and he just spends his time complaining to his father when things go wrong for him. He's easy to hate, but not for the right reasons. I'm sorry, but I really don't like Helmeppo in this arc. While he does get better in the future, yes, Helmeppo does return in the future, goddammit, he just isn't enjoyable to watch in my humble opinion. Fortunately, Captain Morgan is a much better villain than both Helmeppo and Alvida. While he may not be as strong as Luffy, Morgan proves his strength by splitting the ground in half with his signature axe hand. Also, considering how much that axe probably weighs, the fact that he's able to wield it so easily is certainly impressive. Morgan has more than just strength though. He has quite a bit of intelligence and charisma, two things that Alvida and Helmeppo noticeably lack. Morgan only has a brief appearance in this arc, but he leaves a much stronger impression than previous villains. From the very beginning, we get a sense of foreboding from him when we see the townspeople scattering at the mere mention of his name. When we meet Helmeppo and see how cruel he can be, we get a taste of just how evil Morgan is. Morgan's introduction is built up from the very beginning of the arc, and when we finally see him, he doesn't disappoint. He looks both interesting and intimidating, with the metal brace across his jaw and an axe for a hand. He looks much more dignified than previous villains, and that is a big plus. Also, while his ideals are flawed, I found them to be very interesting. He believes that rank and title are the only important things in the world. To him, the fact that he has a title automatically makes him right, and those without a title are not worth noting. This viewpoint is in direct opposition to both Luffy and Zorro. To Luffy, it is what you do that matters rather than what you're known as. He has to earn the title of Pirate King through his actions alone, and even then it will take many years of hard work. Zorro has spent many years honing his skills in order to become the best swordsman in the world. In both cases, title is a result of strength rather than being a proof of strength. Morgan has to learn the hard way that title isn't everything when he gets curb stomped by Luffy. And boy, was that curb stomp satisfying, let me tell you. Overall, Morgan is a major step up from Alvida. While he may not have the most original motivation in the world, his ideals are certainly interesting and make sense considering the fact that he is in the Marines, where rank and title are considered very important. He has both charisma and strength, and his battle with Luffy was very enjoyable for me. He may have been defeated quickly, but Morgan certainly left an impact on me. Maybe not as much as later villains, but for where we are in the show, Morgan is good enough for me. The only other secondary character in this arc is Rika. Now, Rika may only appear very briefly, but she does have an important role in this arc. It is because of Rika that Zorro is tied up in the prison yard. It may not be her fault, but she does feel responsible, and that is why she brought Zorro the onigiri. Through this action, she exposed the corrupt Marines to Luffy and Kobe and brought out Zorro's true colors. Rika also explained to Luffy how Zorro sacrificed himself for her, making Luffy further interested in having Zorro for a crewmate. Again, Rika may have only appeared briefly, but she did have an important role in this arc. Now, while Rika has not made another appearance in the anime, there is reason to believe that she will show up again in the future. Recently, Rika has made an appearance in a chapter title page of the manga. This is important because Oda likes to introduce new story elements in the chapter titles. It isn't 100% certain, but you might be seeing more of her in the future. Altogether, I thought the Captain Morgan arc was a huge improvement in terms of character growth. While I did not like Helmeppo all that much, the rest of the characters all left an impact on me. As a character, Morgan is an improvement over Alvida, who had zero charisma and little to no development, and the other characters all get a chance to shine. Kobe's character arc is fully completed for the time being, giving us a glimpse of what he will be like in the future. Zorro proves how completely badass he is, and Luffy continues to showcase how interesting and different he can be. The character development will only continue to improve in the future. One thing I noticed upon repeated viewings is that there's quite a bit of Christian symbolism in this arc. When the devil fruits are brought up by Captain Morgan, they're shown in the shape of a cross, which is interesting considering they're called devil fruits. In addition, Zorro has numerous parallels to Jesus in this arc. He was tied to a cross-shaped post for several weeks without food or water, sacrificing himself for people he doesn't know. He's beaten and tortured by people he once worked for, and he's almost executed for a crime that he did not commit. Now, I'm not sure if any of this was Oda's intention, but the symbolism is certainly there. Does it have an impact on the overall plot? Not really, but it's still interesting to note. Another thing to note is the word written on Captain Morgan's metal jaw. Now, I can't pronounce it myself, but the word is German for seagull, which is a symbol of the Marines. Why is it written in German? I'm not entirely sure, but it certainly looks cool, and it adds to the intimidation factor of Captain Morgan. Now, Oda has admitted that Captain Morgan is based on a real-life pirate, but he hasn't officially stated who yet. Fan speculation is that he's based upon Henry Morgan, an admiral in the British Navy who turned to piracy in his latter years. This would certainly fit with the character, especially because of something we learn later down the line. Helmeppo, on the other hand, is not based on anyone in particular. I know I keep bringing it up, but I really don't like him or his design. Fun fact, Morgan was originally supposed to have a weird haircut like Helmeppo, but his editor rejected the design because, and I quote, "it looked too ugly." And this is why we have editors, people. Thank you, editors. I love you. It may seem obvious who Zorro is based on due to his recognizable first name, but his origins are actually somewhat complicated. Roranoa's surname is taken from the Japanese pronunciation of the French pirate Francois Lolonoa, but that is the only concrete information we have on his creation. Many fans, myself included, believe that he's also based on Zorro, the protagonist from The Mask of Zorro. However, Oda has, to my knowledge, never officially stated if this is true. There is also the complication of how his name is pronounced. In some English translations, Zorro's name was changed to Zolo. Fans of the original anime were upset about this because it severs the connection to Zorro and it just sounds silly. However, this pronunciation can be explained when you consider the fact that in Japan, L's are pronounced like R's. A case can be made that this translation is accurate to the original spelling of the name. A case can also be made that the character was always supposed to be called Zolo because the name has been spelled numerous different ways even in Japan. In my opinion, Zorro just makes much more sense. Oda has a history of basing his characters on real-life figures and changing the pronunciation of their names to fit the Japanese language. It would be understandable for him to take away an R from Zorro's name and pronounce it Zorro. In the end though, it all comes down to personal preference. I think Zorro sounds cooler, and so I will continue to refer to him as such. The background music is a major step up from the last arc. Last time, I only really found one track memorable. During this arc, just about every single track left an impact on me. The use of the instrumental version of We Are was a nice touch in episode 2, and the western themes for Zorro are just badass. Altogether, this was a great improvement. The animation also seems better than before. While there are still moments where characters are completely static, these moments are much fewer than before, and overall the animation seems smoother. The fight scene with Morgan showcases how fast and clean this animation can be in the late 90s, and it will only improve in the future. As I said before, Captain Morgan is a great villain. He's intimidating, he's interesting, and he has a legitimate motivation. He's not as powerful as Luffy, but the fight proved that he's much stronger than any ordinary man. Is he perfect? No, but he beats Alvida any day of the week. One thing I loved about this arc in particular was the radical change in themes from the last arc. Last arc, we had a theme of all pirates are bad except for Luffy. While the Marines weren't portrayed in a positive light, Kobe viewed them as heroes, and so pirates became the villains of the arc. In this arc, that theme is completely turned upside down. Here, it's the pirates and the demon pirate hunter who are the heroes, and the Marines who are the villains. By doing this, Oda is showing that Marines are not inherently just, and pirates are not inherently evil. Everything in this world is colored with moral gray areas, and this perfectly illustrates that point. You can't just call one group justice and one group villains because not every member of the group is the same. This theme is both deep and effective, and I just love the scene where Kobe tells Luffy to crush the Marines. It is just so damn powerful. Both Mayumi Tanaka and Mika Doi turn in great performances once again, but the real highlight is Kazuya Nakai as Zorro. Kazuya is a well-known seiyuu in Japan for his roles as Mugen in Samurai Champloo and Hijikata in Gintama. Nakai does an amazing job as Zorro and is fully able to bring across how completely badass Zorro can be while still being able to laugh and joke around with Luffy. It is somewhat hard to go between acting serious and acting comical, but Nakai does it with relative ease. He's perfect for this character, and I consider it his best role to date. Also, I just really love the timbre of his voice. It has this growl to it that I just love. Banjo Ginga does a great job in his role as Morgan. Ginga is also well known for his roles as Giren Zabi in Mobile Suit Gundam and Crocodine in Dragon Quest Dai no Doboken. Ginga really captures the self-importance of Captain Morgan and delivers each line with the perfect amount of threat and entitlement. I find that he likes to over-enunciate certain words to make himself sound much more intimidating, and it certainly works for the character. Helmeppo is voiced by Koichi Nagano, and he does a fairly good job in the role. He should be commended for making Helmeppo sound much less annoying than other dubs I've heard, but this is certainly not his best role to date. Personally, I liked him much better as Ryokan Kurita in Eyeshield 21. Also, while she only had a few lines, I enjoyed Emi Uegawa as Rika. She's cute, adorable, and most importantly, isn't annoying like other child characters later down the line. Oh, we'll get to you soon, Apis. We will get to you soon. In terms of the dub, the Morgan arc is a major improvement in my opinion. Leah Clark is still great as Kobe, but Colleen Clinkenbeard really steps up her game as Luffy in this arc. She makes the most of even the shorter lines that Luffy has in the dub, and she has much better energy. Then again, Luffy doesn't shout as much in this episode, which I said was the problem last time. Either way, I think it's a marked improvement. As for Zorro, he's voiced by Christopher Sabat in the dub, and this is simply a perfect casting role. Sabat is well known for his roles as Piccolo and Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z, Kuwabara in Yu Yu Hakusho, Louise Armstrong in Fullmetal Alchemist, and of course All Might in My Hero Academia. He has a penchant for playing badass manly characters, and this is one of his best roles. Even when I was a kid, I thought this was one of the best casting decisions when the dub switched over to Funimation, and I still think that today. Sabat really brings out the badass aloofness of Zorro. He simply embodies the character so much, and I can think of no better person to fit this role. As for Captain Morgan, while it's different from Banjo's performance, I really do enjoy Brett Weaver in the role. He has a commanding cadence to his voice that I haven't heard before. It's not super deep or super rough, but it has this tone to it that I do find intimidating. Brett has voiced numerous minor roles in anime and will return later on in One Piece, so I'll be interested to hear him again in the future. Helmeppo is voiced by Troy Baker of all people, which is probably the strangest casting choice I've seen so far in this anime. For those who don't know, Troy Baker has had some major roles in video games, including Joel in The Last of Us, Reese in Tales from the Borderlands, Delsin Rowe in Infamous Second Son, Kanji in Persona 4, and Snow in Final Fantasy XIII. He's also done major anime roles such as Frank Archer in Fullmetal Alchemist, Jin Korea in Bleach, and Pain in Naruto. So with all of that being said, he usually voices a suave or badass male character who likes to wisecrack and make jokes. Helmeppo is very much outside his normal range, but man does he do a strangely good job in this role. He plays the character completely foppish and feminine and really plays up the annoying aspect aspect of Helmeppo, but at the same time, that works because it fully embodies the character. I can't fault him because he provides the voice I expected Helmeppo to have given his horrible character, and it strangely works. As for Rika, she is unfortunately the weak link in the dub. The others all turn in great performances throughout the arc, but Kate Oxley is really a horrible fit for the character. She's far too high-pitched and sounds way too old for the character. This is a case where the sub gets it completely right, and the dub is nowhere near as good for this specific character. From what I can gather, she's been voicing characters for a while, but this is one of her early roles, and it really does show in this case. One thing I do want to bring up in terms of the Japanese sub is that the official subtitles on the Funimation release are not that great. I watched both the sub and the dub again for this video, and the dub is really well translated, but the official sub on the DVD is not. They refer to the Marines as the Navy the entire time, and certain lines are changed to sound rather stilted. It's a very literal translation that really doesn't come across well compared to other subtitle tracks I've seen. It's a shame because otherwise the DVD is really good, but I would much rather watch the subs on Crunchyroll because their translation and subtitle presentation is way better in this case. When your subtitles are not as good as fan translations, you really do need to step up your game, Funimation. In terms of the manga, this arc is a much more faithful adaptation than the Alvida arc. Most of the events play out exactly like the manga, and there are dozens of screenshots that are exact replicas of panels from the manga itself. With that being said, there are still a few noteworthy changes. The most noticeable change from the manga is the addition of orange hair to this arc. Last time, I stated that I liked the introduction of orange hair during the Alvida arc because it gave us an early introduction to her character. We got to see that she was smart, she was manipulative, and she was a thief. She used every situation to her advantage in order to steal Alvida's treasure. She came across as a strong female character, and her meeting with Luffy was the best scene in the episode. With that being said, Orange Hair has absolutely no reason to be in the Captain Morgan arc. She contributes nothing to the arc, and she just feels tacked on. First of all, why does she randomly appear in the same bar that Helmeppo barges into? Are there no other bars on this island? Secondly, why does she react like that when Luffy enters the bar? She met Luffy just the other day, and she acts like she hasn't seen him before. This brief appearance in episode 2 feels entirely forced and adds nothing to the story. When she appears again in episode 3, her only purpose is to provide exposition for the next story arc. She introduces the next villain, Captain Buggy, and it feels out of place for her character. This scene also raises a few questions. Why does Captain Morgan have a map to the Grand Line, and how did Captain Buggy steal it? From what we have seen of Morgan during this arc, he has no knowledge of the Grand Line and has no intention of heading over there. He has no reason to have ever owned the map, and there is no mention of a breach in Marine security before Luffy's arrival. I suppose that Morgan could have acquired the map for Captain Buggy, but then why would he keep a fake map of the Grand Line in his office? Why would Buggy write a note stating that he has the map now? And how would Orange Hair know that Morgan had it in the first place? It just raises too many questions. Another thing that makes no sense is the way she talks about Buggy. She talks about him like she has a personal vendetta against the guy. She even crumples the fake map not once, but twice. Hatred of pirates is understandable given what we'll learn about her in the next arc, but this is just ridiculous. She's never met Buggy before, and she acts like he is her arch nemesis or something. Again, I really liked her appearance in the Alvida arc, but Orange Hair has no business being in this arc. It would have worked much better if she didn't appear again until the Buggy arc. Another major change is the fact that we don't learn about Zorro's past for a few more arcs in the anime. In the manga, we're told exactly what happened in Zorro's past during chapter 5. In the anime, we're only given 2 short flashbacks that only give us vague hints about the past. Personally, I really like this change. I felt that Zorro's past was revealed far too early in the manga, and this change allows us to speculate about what happened to him in his past. He remains mysterious to the audience, and we're constantly given hints about his past. This is a great way to make us want to watch every episode of the anime in the hope that his past will be revealed in the future. Again, this is a personal preference, but I thought the anime handled it a bit better. One scene that I pointed out in my analysis of Luffy was the scene where he runs the wrong way before attacking the marine base. The main reason I pointed this scene out is because it's not in the manga. In the manga, Luffy simply walks over to the base to grab the swords. He knows exactly where the marine base is. In the anime, Luffy runs the wrong way, and I still believe that Luffy did this on purpose. It would make no sense for the animators to make Luffy look so idiotic unless there was a purpose behind it. Again, I could be wrong, but I really hope I'm not. One scene I'm glad was dropped in the transition to anime is when Koby breaks into the prison yard to free Zorro and he's shot in the shoulder. I just don't feel like this added much to the scene. It adds a bit of tension to the end of the chapter, but he appears to be just fine in the next chapter. He never goes to the doctor, and it's never referenced again. The scene just flowed much better in the anime without Koby getting shot. Another scene that worked much better in the anime is the introduction of Zorro. Now, don't get me wrong, the manga's introduction of Zorro was just as badass as the anime, but there is one major thing that doesn't work in the manga. Zorro asks Luffy to free him from his bonds. Yes, this makes sense from the perspective of a normal person. He's been tied up for days without food and water. He would want to be freed as soon as possible, right? The problem is, Zorro is not a normal person. He sacrificed himself to save Rika, and he survived for this long out of sheer determination to survive. It just doesn't make sense for him to ask Luffy to free him. In the anime, they changed the scene so that Zorro just asks Luffy and Koby to get lost because they're annoying him. This just fits better with his character and with the continuity of the arc. For the most part, I have been talking about how the anime improved upon the manga, but there is one important thing that I wish they had kept in the anime. In the manga, when Koby asks to become a marine a second time, there's a panel that focuses closely on his eyes. In this panel, his eyes look a bit different than normal. This won't make sense until over 400 episodes down the line, but this is foreshadowing for a trait that both he and Luffy share. Unfortunately, this was not shown in the anime. The animators might not have known the significance of the panel at the time, but it's a shame that it wasn't included. The only other differences between the manga and the anime are minor and have to do with the dialogue. In the anime, Zorro states that he'll kill Luffy if he interferes with his ambition, but in the manga, Zorro states that he'll make Luffy commit seppuku. This is an understandable change because suicide is a hot topic these days, and it makes much more sense for him to threaten to kill Luffy instead. Also, in the anime, Zorro is said to have survived for 3 weeks without food or water, but in the manga, Zorro is said to have survived for 9 days. While the manga is a bit more realistic, I love the idea that Zorro is so badass that he survived for 3 weeks through sheer willpower alone. What is he, an extra from Gurren Lagann? Again, these are only minor changes and don't affect the story all that much. Overall, I find the anime adaptation of the Captain Morgan arc makes a lot of improvements to the source material. While there are 2 changes that I don't really care for, the majority of changes serve to make the anime flow much better. The anime seems to understand these characters a bit more, and the added mystery makes us want to learn more about Zorro. I have to say, this is a much better adaptation than the Alvida arc. With all that being said, the Captain Morgan arc was a huge step up from the Alvida arc. While there were a few things that I didn't like, the positives certainly outweighed the negatives. The animation, music, and character development all received a major overhaul, and there was some great development for the world of One Piece. While the plot was basic, the execution was fantastic, and the villain was actually a threat this time around. Helmeppo may have been annoying, but he was understated throughout the arc, and the rest of the cast all got a chance to prove their worth. All in all, this was a good arc, and a step in the right direction for One Piece. Thank you all very much for watching. I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns. If you like what you see, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you too can join the Bun Squad. Have a good one, everybody.